Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Women Empowerment Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Gideon, and it is my absolute pleasure today to bring forward an amazing person, someone I'm actually really excited to interview, the founder of Sadlier Communications and winner of the 2023 Lifetime Achievement Award, Rosemary Sadlier. Rosemary, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yes, I've been so looking forward to this. Lifetime Achievement Award is big. This is really big. And congratulations on that, by the way. But we've got lots to cover, so let's jump into it if that's okay. I really find it quite interesting just where people grew up and how that shaped who they are today. So could you fill us in a little bit about, where did you grow up? What was childhood like for you? And maybe how you feel it influenced who you are today.
Well, I'm one of the invisible people that people just assume we don't exist. I'm a generational African Canadian, and I didn't realize that when I was a child. I just knew that my parents were of African origin, and so was I, and we were living in Toronto. In my neighborhood, we were the only Black family. And I played, it was a time when we could play on the street with everybody, and we did. And my race was never really an issue. But there would be things that would come up in school from time to time that made me wonder. And I didn't have the vocabulary to really appreciate some of how I could express that back to my family. And by
Mhm.
the time I went to high school, I had a lovable, wonderful teacher who was advising everyone I'm in class with that Black people were actually racially inferior to white people. This is an authority figure.
Yeah.
This is a situation where I am the only one. I was in a high school of 1,400, I believe, and there were 10 Black students spread through all grades. This just didn't sit quite right with me. And so the other side of that is that I had the opportunity to go to a Black church, and my church experience helped me to realize that there were people who looked like me and the whole rainbow of people who are Black in Canada who were intelligent, caring, committed, responsible, and doing things. And they lived not just in Toronto, but everywhere.
Yes. Yes. So you were saying that at that time you didn't have the language to go to your parents. So how did you cope? How did you manage with that? Were you ever able to go to your parents or somebody at your church maybe?
You don't really, you don't go to your parents, and if you do, I'm sure they probably helped me deal with it through the reality that we were a minority. And so there were going to be times when it was going to be incredibly unfair and ridiculous, but, to try to find a way to work around it. And I think that that put me in a good position because I know what's true. It's helped me be independent and make up my own mind. It's helped me be in situations where I'm hearing things about other groups or women or, ability groups, what have you. And I can hear that, but I can also come away and say, know what's true, know what might be, how I can tease that out a bit and have greater faith in my own judgment and my own abilities.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So my next question is going to be like, was there anybody who was pivotal in your experience to, where you are today? That doesn't always mean good, right? Like just because they're pivotal doesn't mean that it was like, a great experience. But for you, was there somebody who was pivotal, who helped you stand for what you do today?
Well, there were so many people that's the reality. But first and foremost was my mother. As I said, I'm a generational Canadian. So the things that I was experiencing, even if she didn't want to dwell on them with me, she'd certainly gone through them herself. And she had her own coping mechanisms, which I believe I adopted and which I believe I have also passed on to my children. So my mother was very important in my understanding my identity and how to cope with situations of ignorance, or or worse. I think, people want to say that Canada is a different place than the United States, and it certainly is. But the very same issues that we hear about in the news taking place in the United States have certainly taken place here. I have seen many things, and if I haven't, my friends have. So I think my mother was critical in that. In terms of my church, there were so many examples of people doing things, people who were in leadership positions, people who had incredible oratorical skills, who were just bright people. And I think I've also been influenced by a lot of really good friends. I'll mention one here in particular, unfortunately, who passed away, but a family friend who was a lawyer. And I can't remember when I first met him, but it's like I always knew him. And that's Paul Braithwaite. So he might be that person that if I had a legal question, I knew I could just pick up the phone and ask him, because sometimes it's not legal. Sometimes it's just you just want to vent, and your friends can listen to you do that. And my white friends could listen to me vent about women issues, and my black friends could listen to me vent about black issues. And then if it was something more than that, it might be my mother or other friends or elders in the community. And if it was something of a legal nature, it might be Paul. So it depended on what the issue was as to who I might go to find an answer or a reference in terms of what I should look into in order to come away with a better answer or a better way to approach the situation.
Yeah, all those different supports I find between mom, parents, this friend of yours. I find that so important. I wish everybody had certain, friends and supports and whatnot like that, because I depend on them. I know how much I depend on them.
And of course, when I was heading the only provincial heritage organization in the country with a focus on Black history, one of my strongest supports was Aileen Williams. And Aileen had been part of a number of Black organizations, very progressive for the time. The Canadian Negro Women's Association, which actually held the first celebration of February as Black History Month, but under the radar, so to speak.
Mhm.
She was incredibly committed to the work of the OBHS, saw the value in it, and she was always there as a sounding board. So I've been very lucky with people who have comparable commitments to my own. But as you said, there are also the people who don't. And so those people who have said things or done things that have helped you know that they have a very narrow perspective, working from that, working in opposition to that, certainly has put me where I am today. I had in a funny way, I had a teacher in public school, I guess probably about grade 8, who was very much into gender norms for the time,
Okay.
felt that I should be a secretary.
Okay.
Well, I had no interest in being a secretary, and with full respect to people who are.
Yeah.
And of course, the joke is, what do I do most of the time now? I'm typing in the computer.
Right.
But at the time, I mean, this was not what I wanted to do. And so his saying that actually gave me sort of a boundary. Okay, this is what I don't want. So what's over here that I might want? And he probably didn't expect that his advice would be used in that way, but that's how it was used.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. That's what I mean sometimes, where it's like these things that, you know, they're not always, a positive thing, but that, as you said, gave you that boundary where it's like, no, this is what I know I don't want. So let's explore maybe more what I do. If we can talk a little bit about social justice, I'd love to know how you define social justice. And was there a certain moment that made you say, I want this to change? Or was it a gradual evolution over time?
No, it was always. It's just sometimes it's called different things, but you can't be a Black person in a society that doesn't reflect you without noticing. And you don't wake up one day when you're, 29, which I have been for a number of years now, and feel that, oh, that's wrong. You know that
Yeah.
it's wrong when you're 2. You know that it's wrong when you're 4. You know that it's wrong when you're 7. You know that it's wrong when you're 10. And while it may not be called social justice, it's definitely knowing that there are inequities that impact people significantly who look like you, and what can you do to make a change? So I would say always. It's just how best to act on that. So I did have a role of church leadership, which took me around the province, and that was helpful in terms of really appreciating how to work in an organization, what governance looks like, what it means to be a trustee. Because I'm not talking about the spiritual aspects of the church necessarily. I'm talking about the organizational, social, cultural aspects of the church because it was a Black church, which still exists. But later, when I was married, had children of my own, had already completed a master's degree in social work, I found myself appointed to the board of the Ontario Black History Society. And I took that mandate particularly seriously. 3 years later, when I was appointed, nominated, voted in as president, only because I was early for a meeting. um, Never go to meetings early. Uh, I really wasn't prepared. I had 3 kids at home. My youngest was still nursing. I was at the meeting early because I had to get home to make sure I got them all in bed. So I didn't have an agenda. And but I really did fully appreciate this. This was an important role, and I was going to do what I could once I had it. I almost blew it out of the park in a bad way, because what I didn't know is that February as Black History Month was only something that was celebrated with the City of Toronto at that time. And the Ontario Black History Society was supposed to, and I didn't know this, go to the City of Toronto and say, please, can we have the proclamation? And I didn't know that. February was almost here, and it's like, we have no proclamation. I was told that we were past the deadline for asking. It was a nightmare, but I was able to call in a lot of favors. And I decided that was never going to happen to anybody who found themselves in that position ever. And I knew how important Black History Month was at that time. I mean, people were still challenged to say Black. People, and then the population numbers were a little bit different. It was just a different time.
Mhm.
So I decided that I was going to get a proclamation for the province of Ontario. I did. I started the process to have a national commemoration of February as Black History Month, which I got. And I also, in the meantime, got a proclamation of Black History Month with every province in the country.
Jeez.
So once the national declaration was passed, after I had built up a community of interest to make that happen by offering 2,000 Black History presentations, I was very delighted when it finally was passed in December 1995. And in February 1996, I, along with the few Black members of Parliament, as well as one who was not, um, were on stage celebrating the first National Black History Month. And I was addressing the nation. It was really, really a very powerful moment.
Yeah. Well, I was just so thrilled when I do research on everybody, and when I learned that you were responsible for helping to make that decision happen. I was just so, wow, this is what a change maker, what a powerful thing to do. And yeah, just really honored to be sitting across from you here, Rosemary, with such, that's huge. It's such a big deal.
And
Yeah.
around the same time, I started on another one that you might know about, because that one was pretty fast. I became president about 1993. And this happened by December 1995. But around the same time, I started working on having August 1st as Emancipation Day. And it went back, and I was quick with the city of Ottawa as well. by 2008, I had achieved the first unanimous all parties agreed that yes, August 1st should be Emancipation Day in Ontario, but it had been going back and forth a couple of times. It went to second reading it with the federal government. It never ended up being passed. Well, I was already not with the Ontario Black History Society anymore. I was following this through on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Finally went through in March of 2021 with Majid Jahawari. So with Jean Augustine Black History Month, with Majid Jahawari Emancipation Day, which um, marks the end of slavery of Africans and First Nations on the land that we now call Canada.
Yeah. So can I ask you, what is it like to lead something like that, like a process like that? Um, I'm just curious about that experience and what that was like for you.
One of the things I think I learned from my mother is you just do the work. There's no point in complaining about how hard it is. There's no point in, I mean, yes, you can vent. Venting is important.
Yeah.
Uh, but you just do it. I mean, I wasn't doing this because I was doing it because I fully appreciated the magnitude of the impact it could have on the community. I was doing it because I knew what had not been there for me. I was doing it because of what needed to be there for my children and the people that they were going to school with or that they interact with. I was doing it for everyone else and for me, because that's what being a trustee is. And I believe that as the head of the OBHS for over 22 years, that is what I was. I looked upon what I was doing as a cultural legacy, and I was constantly using myself because I had to. I had very few resources as that means of making people aware, doing community outreach, and celebrating when we achieve something.
Yes, absolutely. I hope so. I hope that's, celebration happened. Um, and I guess I'm curious from your perspective because these are big changes that you've, pushed forward and but from your perspective, what needs to happen next?
Well, I don't, we have the grand narrative. We have a great country. We really do. And it's even a greater company. It's even a greater country when you have everything you need to flourish.
Mhm.
And the reality is that not everybody has everything that they need to flourish. And so until that point in time when everybody, or a lot more people at the very least, have everything that they need to flourish, we're not there yet. We like to think of ourselves as being different from other countries that have egregious things going on, but those same things happen here. So that was the important part of my having worked on Black History Month, to clearly indicate, even if you don't realize that's what it's doing, that we have a Black history in this country. And that Black
Yeah.
history started before Confederation. And that Black history started at least as early as 1604. Having Emancipation Day is a way of saying before Confederation, we had the enslavement of First Nations and Africans. And that piece that happened before Confederation continues to have an impact on how First Nations and people of African descent are regarded. Some of those stereotypes that we still see today can be tracked back to that point in time. So, all of that to say that we need to be constantly challenging what we think we know about people, especially if they're different from us. And we have to keep seeking ways to make things better for everyone.
And do you feel that the educational system, or, I mean, where do you think we can keep that education piece going for people? Because it's what it's a lot about, right? Is the education piece. That's what I feel like, but I could be totally wrong.
Agree. I think it is. I mean, that's really what has pushed me forward. It's all about the education. It's about alerting and making aware and raising awareness. And I mean, we're so far behind because there's been, a very long period of time when there was no credence given to even the existence of Black people in this country. So when you're working from that basis, um, we're so far behind in the education that does need to happen. And that's one of the unfortunate aspects that we are still, what, Black History Month nationally was passed in December 1995, and we still in this country fail to have required Black history education from kindergarten to grade 12 with measurable objectives.
Yeah.
Um, that's not a good thing, especially when our numbers of people coming from Africa and the Caribbean have increased. And it's not a good thing because if we don't know about each other um, fully, like the kids on the street knew about me and my family, um, how do we feel when that Black woman comes in looking for a job? And how do we feel when that Black guy, Black man comes in and is interested in purchasing that house? Like, what
Yeah.
are things that are behind how we interact with other people? How do we know that we need to challenge some of our assumptions if we think that everything that we think we know that is given to us by the media is enough?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
really have to look at it. And while education, I just should say, is not a federal mandate, I really had hoped that the federal declaration would be further incentive to all the provinces to make sure that they did something in terms of the educational system.
Yes. And I noticed when I was, doing my research that, and I can't remember if it was your site or a site that you're affiliated with, but it had specific like activity suggestions for grades. I think it was 7 till 12. And I looked through those and I thought these are really great resources, but that's not mandated. Like it's not necessarily mandated. It's just, hey, here are some resources, guys, if you want to have a look, but that's not mandated, is it?
Well, it's not. I mean, I've written 8 books. I have a book coming out shortly. You can check it on Amazon. Pre-orders are available. Actually, I'll just show you. I have
Yes.
a poster right here.
Perfect.
This is what the cover looks like, and I'll send this to you.
Yeah.
But it's called The Kids Book of Black History in Canada. That's my new one.
Amazing.
And pre-order on Amazon if you're interested. But what's great about kids' books is that it's a quick read. You get an idea of some of the people and the events that are important. And if you're curious, then you can do some further reading and research to find out more. And I think the other part of it is that you can do it in your own time, whether you have Wi-Fi or not. But what's really important about this book, it's Canadian.
Yes.
And there's nothing more challenging than going into speak, and I will be going into some classrooms in the coming weeks, and all year really, going into a classroom to talk about Black history. And there's a lot of material that's about Black people in the United States, which is a great thing. There's material, but then it's kind of taking away from what you're trying to do, which is to say we have Black history in this country
Yeah.
too.
Yes.
I worked, it took me 10 years to, with a number of amazing people from Juan Arellano and Zeb Jeva to Ingrid Wilson, but over 10 years to get a bust of the Honorable Lincoln Alexander unveiled in Queen's Park. And Lincoln Alexander was the first Black man in the country who was appointed lieutenant governor of any province. We have a national day in his honor, and people will still say they don't know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
So we aren't doing enough to
Mm-hmm.
talk about the people in this country. And certainly when I got this award, the Women's Empowerment Award, um, I really looked upon it as an opportunity, yes, to bring attention to me, but to bring attention to the work that I've been trying to do and to encourage people to support women, support Black women, and to learn about people who may have different experiences and backgrounds than they have.
Yes. Well, and I wanted to maybe talk a little bit more about that award and that evening. And, again, congratulations on that award. That's an amazing, the Lifetime Achievement Award. What was that like to receive that award? And what was that like, as you're on the podium and you're looking out into that group? What's that like? I'm so curious about that experience.
I don't think I was really there. I think it was it was like I was there, but it was like I was at an out of body experience.
Yeah.
And what was wonderful about it is that I really felt the love and the caring and the support coming from other women out there, women who had had a chance to speak to in advance, some women just seeing them nod as I was telling aspects of my story. um, I really felt that it was very affirming for me. I was so happy that my children were there to share it with me and some great supporters. I really hoped that it would mean that um, it would help people think about things a bit differently. And hopefully even this interview will make people think, hey, let me call Rosemary and see if we can work together on something, rather than maybe doing the things that they usually do in the same way, even to be different and challenge yourself in terms of how you do your work.
Yeah. One of the things I love about the women empowerment, just that whole group is the people that you meet and the connections that can be made.
Claudia is so amazing. Oh my gosh. So full of energy, so positive. I really valued knowing her, and I actually just heard from her the other day. It wasn't sort of like one and done. Okay, we did that. I'm still included in a lot of communications. I still see things coming out on social media, and I hear from her. She's amazing.
She
Uh,
is.
and there are so many other amazing women who were there, who are powerhouses in their own right. But I really felt that this opened a door and made it possible for me to be able to um, enjoy meeting them again.
Yeah. Yeah. So other than that win and that moment that you had on that podium, were there any other parts that stood out to you about the evening, or was there another, maybe a favorite part?
I think, the experience of being so affirmed was top of the list.
Hmm.
Um, I think that seeing all of the many vendors and display people just being treated so specially, it was sort of like, yes, I'm here, and yes, of course, I'll have that glass of champagne. And
Yes.
it was really a night of feeling very special. I had my photo taken with a number of different people, which are wonderful keepsakes.
Mhm.
Um, and just knowing that I was in a room with people who had done so much, were so accomplished, and were so humble at the same time, it was quite amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Absolutely. Um, so I always ask people who I interview this because I think it's really important. And I'm in the world of mental health. And so, with everything that you've done and through all the struggles and stress and projects and everything like that, how do you manage your mental health? And maybe you can give us some tips here. So, what's this? The only one?
All of my books are on African Canadian history or African Canadian women. And this is one book that I've written that's about mental health. So
Amazing.
I didn't know you were going to, I didn't remember that question, but it's basically talking about what it means to be the only one. And I was the only one growing up in not just racially, but in a few other respects as well, so I encourage you, get the book.
Yes.
It's part of the Pearson Well Aware series. But I think in terms of your question, how do I cope? I'm a really resilient person, and I have learned to be incredibly independent. And I will hear what people think, what people say, read what people say. And not that I don't care, but I don't care
Mhm.
because I have a purpose. I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing because it's important to me. I think I was most pushed into doing what I was doing by the surprise election to being the head of a provincial heritage organization, by being on time. But also my children, well, they're grown up now, but they were young and they were having um really question experiences that really made them question their identity and their ability to be treated as equals. And that was very painful for me because coming out of university, getting married, having children, you kind of think, oh, everything's okay. We've
Mhm.
talked about this, we've addressed this, but we haven't solved it. And those issues continued, and my children were experiencing them. One of my children, just, I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but she was very popular. Uh, I didn't really hear about any issues, but one time, one of her friends had a birthday party. And what was happening is that people were kind of inviting the whole class, like they were at that age.
Mhm.
She was the only one that wasn't invited. And she happened to also be the only Black student in her class. I'm not sure if that happened around the time that I was with the Ontario Black History Society, but it was, as an adult, it's like, who cares, right? But as a child, that is
Yes,
devastating.
it is.
And it's very significant because it's not just the child, it's the adults in that child's
Yeah.
um, frame of reference. So it was very important. The books that she was getting in school that were sharing stereotypes that should have been identified and addressed or not even been part of the learning experience, they were still there. So, I mean, these things continue. And so mental health is about resilience, it's about flexibility, it's about accepting the reality that you find yourself in. It's about having your own set of skills that work for you. And for me, I've been told that I'm good stubborn. It means I know if I know that something's important and I know why it would be helpful, I will do it. It might take me 20 years, like Emancipation Day, might take me 10 years, like it did for the Lincoln Alexander bust, but I will do that. That's how I cope. I use my purpose to propel my actions, and from my actions, do what I can, and then accept that I'm making the changes that I can make and hope that other people will join and be part of that.
Wow, really, really powerful. With all of the different projects that you've done, I mean, all the books and the speaking, all the work with OBH and is there one part of your career that you look back on? Um, I don't know if favorite is the right word, but is there one instance or one project that you worked on that meant a little bit more, or maybe was just extra special to you?
Wow. There's so many.
I know it's a tough question.
I think that moment of knowing that I had achieved a National Black History Month with Jean Augustine, that moment when I knew that I had achieved a national commemoration of August 1st is Emancipation Day. That moment when the achievements have been realized.
Mm.
I have done a plaque unveiling. I nominate people, places, and events for historic recognition as well. And one of them was I just did in Quebec City, and it was to um, recognize the first named, not the first African, but the first named enslaved person in this country. And his name was Olivier Lejeune, Oliver the Young One. The plaque is in Quebec City, and he was an 8-year-old child. And to me, that is not that it's the most important, but it's part of a series of things that are very important. Slavery isn't just something that happened and is over. It happened, and we continue to see the effects. And slavery also included children. So I think sometimes people think, oh, well, let's wait until grade 12.
Right.
They know what fairness is when they're 2.
Yeah.
So it's finding the language that works so that you can have those discussions.
Yes.
And so what is it that's important to me? All of it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it all helps to work towards, I hope, making things better for us all.
So you had mentioned that you knew at 2 it was unfair. You knew at 4, you knew at 6. If you could go back now to young Rosemary and give her one piece of advice, what do you think you would say to her?
That she's on the right path. And while there are going to be challenges and barriers and opposition, there will also be successes and achievements. And she should stay the course.
Wow, amazing. It was such a pleasure to interview you, Rosemary. This concludes our podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all the work that you do. Um, and 2023 Lifetime Achievement Award for the Women Empowerment Awards. Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's a gift that keeps on giving. I get prizes, which I still have to collect.
That's true. Oh my gosh. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I know we will be seeing you again and hearing from you soon.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you so much for a great interview.
Take care.